The winter wind howls through the Colorado mountains, sweeping over a lone military outpost buried in snow. Inside, Navy SEAL Ethan Ward stares into the storm until his dog Rex bolts toward the woods. Following him, Ethan finds a wounded mother and her daughter hiding in the cold, clutching a blood-stained USB drive. Moments later, gunfire erupts. A deadly syndicate has tracked them down. As the night ignites with bullets and faith, one soldier must decide, protect his past or fight for their future. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from, and subscribe for more stories of faith, courage, and redemption. The wind rolled low over the Colorado foothills, carrying a fine powder of snow that whispered against the rooftops like restless ghosts. The night was cold enough to turn breath into glass, and every sound, every distant coyote cry or crunch of boot on frost, felt magnified in the stillness. Ethan Ward tightened his parka around his broad shoulders as he stepped out of the armored Humvee, his boots sinking into the half-frozen mud of an abandoned service road. 34 years old, 6'2", lean but solid, from a decade of service in the Navy SEALs, Ethan had the kind of face that looked like it had been carved by winter itself, sharp, controlled, with lines that didn't come from laughter. A faint scar cut diagonally through his right brow, an old memory from a mission gone wrong in Kandahar. His eyes were a cool gray, always searching, always measuring. He wasn't the kind of man who wasted words. Silence had long ago become his armor. Beside him padded Rex, a 4-year-old German shepherd, massive and sure-footed, his coat a deep saddle of black and tan that shimmered faintly in the light of the patrol beacon. Rex moved with the alert precision of a soldier who had earned his stripes. His ears twitched with every distant rustle, his amber eyes scanning the horizon for shapes his human couldn't see. He was more than a dog. He was a compass, the living conscience that had followed Ethan through sand, storm, and snow alike. This part of Boulder's suburban fringe wasn't on any tourist map. Rows of decaying warehouses, silent parking lots buried under snow, the carcasses of a town's industrial past. Ethan's orders were simple: routine perimeter patrol, ensure no one had broken into the restricted zone. But deep down, he knew that tonight wasn't routine. Rex had been restless since sunset, sniffing the wind, pausing, staring toward the line of streetlights that vanished into the white haze. "Easy, boy," Ethan muttered, his voice low, almost tender, the way one might talk to a partner more than a pet. He checked the sidearm at his thigh, the movement automatic. "We sweep, and we're out before the storm gets worse." They moved in silence, crossing the snow-choked lot until the broken silhouette of a storage facility emerged from the darkness. The sign hung by one chain, North Point Logistics, closed since 2012. Rust clung to its letters like decay on bone. Rex suddenly stiffened, his body locking, nose tilting toward one of the warehouse doors. A low growl rumbled from his chest, not the kind meant for threat, but for warning. Ethan's instincts snapped awake. He raised his flashlight, the beam cutting a clean path through the swirling snow. At first, there was nothing, just the abandoned shape of a car half buried under drift. Then he saw it. The shattered window, the spatter of blood frozen on the glass, a door left ajar as if someone had fled mid-breath. Rex moved first, trotting toward the vehicle, nose pressed to the air. Ethan followed, every nerve wired. He peered through the broken door. In the back seat, lay a handbag, a child's jacket, and a small stuffed rabbit missing one ear. And then movement, a shadow near the corner of the warehouse, faint and human. "Hold," Ethan whispered. Rex halted, tense. The figure stumbled into the faint halo of the flashlight. A woman. Her steps were uneven, arms clutching a small bundle close to her chest. Her face was pale, streaked with cold and exhaustion, her breath short and ragged. She wore a dark coat 2 sizes too big, soaked through from the snow, and her long auburn hair clung in damp strands to her face. Beneath the flicker of Ethan's light, he saw her eyes, green, wild with fear, yet burning with a desperate will to keep moving. "Stop right there," Ethan called, stepping forward. "I'm with the U.S. military. Are you hurt?" She froze, trembling, then slowly shook her head. "Please," she said, her voice breaking from cold and panic. "My daughter, she's freezing. Please help us." Ethan approached carefully. The bundle in her arms shifted. It was a little girl no older than 6, wrapped in a thin blanket, her cheeks blue from the cold. She was small and slender, her dark curls matted with ice, her lips slightly parted as she shivered in her mother's hold. Ethan's tone softened. "Let me see her." The woman hesitated, eyes darting between him and Rex. The dog's posture was calm but alert, tail low, head tilted, reading every heartbeat in the air. Finally, she allowed Ethan closer. "I'm Ethan Ward," he said, crouching beside them. "What's your name?" "Emily," she whispered. "Emily Carter. My husband. He was a police officer." Her lips trembled on the word. "He's gone." Gone. The word landed like a gunshot between them. Ethan glanced at the child again. The faint bruising on her wrist, the dirt on her shoes, the way she clutched the stuffed rabbit as if it were life itself. "Emily," Ethan said quietly, "tell me what happened." Her eyes flicked toward the shadows, scanning as if someone might emerge from them. "They killed him," she said, barely audible. He gave me something, a USB. He said it could bring them all down, that I had to run to keep it safe. But they found us. I thought I'd lost them, but—" She broke off, gripping her daughter tighter. "Who's after you?" "Men," she said, swallowing hard. "They own everything. Money, cops, politicians. If they find us, we're dead." Ethan's pulse tightened. He'd seen that look before. The hunted, the hopeless, the ones who'd already buried faith. He stood slowly, scanning the darkness beyond the lot. The snow was falling harder now, smothering the world in silence. "Do you have the drive?" Emily nodded weakly, patting the inside of her coat. "It's here." Rex gave a low whine, turning his gaze toward the distance. Ethan followed the line of the dog's stare and froze. There, half a mile down the road, a pair of headlights blinked briefly, then vanished. Another, then a third. "Damn," he muttered. "They're tracking you?" He stepped forward, taking Emily's arm gently but firmly. "We can't stay here. You'll both freeze, or worse. I've got a safe location 5 miles east. Can you walk?" She nodded faintly. "Yes." "Then move. Stay close to me, and keep her warm." Rex took point, his silhouette cutting through the storm like a seasoned scout. They crossed the lot, weaving through rows of darkened containers. The air burned their lungs, the snow swirling in thick waves now, blotting out the stars. Emily stumbled once, clutching her daughter tighter. Ethan caught her by the elbow, steadying her. He could feel her trembling, not from cold, but from the fear that still lingered behind her eyes. He knew that kind of fear, the one that doesn't leave when the shooting stops. "Why are you helping us?" she asked softly. almost lost to the wind. Ethan didn't answer right away. In truth, he didn't know. Maybe because her voice carried the same crack of desperation he once heard over a radio in the desert, a call he couldn't answer in time. Maybe because the world had taken enough from people like her. Finally, he said, because somebody has to. They reached the end of the lot, where the road dipped toward the woods beyond. For a brief second, Ethan thought they were in the clear, until Rex stopped dead, hackles rising. From behind, through the storm, came the faint echo of tires crunching over ice, engines revving low, deliberate. Ethan turned. In the distance, the beam of a spotlight sliced through the snowfall, sweeping the ruins of the lot. Then a man's voice, amplified through a speaker, rang out. "Emily Carter, you got something that doesn't belong to you." The words cracked the night like thunder. Ethan's hand went to his weapon. Rex bared his teeth. "Run," Ethan said quietly, and in that single command, the quiet night of Colorado broke open. The road that wound east out of Boulder was nearly invisible under the snow. The headlights of Ethan's Humvee cut narrow tunnels through the storm as the vehicle groaned uphill, tires grinding against the ice. Inside, the heater wheezed, doing little against the cold that clung to every surface. Emily sat in the passenger seat, arms wrapped around her daughter Sarah, who had finally fallen asleep against her chest. The child's breathing came slow and shallow, her face flushed with the faint warmth of exhaustion. Ethan's hands gripped the wheel tighter than necessary. He wasn't used to company. His world was usually measured in orders, silence, and the steady pulse of Rex's breath from the back seat. But now there was a woman beside him, someone carrying grief like a living wound, and a child whose very presence reminded him of everything he'd lost. Outside, the town lights disappeared, replaced by the dark outlines of pines. The further they drove, the quieter it became, until even the storm seemed to hush, as though listening. Emily broke the silence first. "My husband's name was Daniel," she said softly, voice barely audible over the wind. "Daniel Carter. He was with Denver PD, Undercover Narcotics Division, or at least that's what they said on paper." Ethan glanced at her briefly. On paper? Her lips pressed together before she spoke. "He was investigating a loan shark ring, the same people chasing us, Iron Vultures. They run half the city from behind fake tech companies and real estate fronts. They loan to people who can't say no. And when those people can't pay, they disappear." She shifted slightly, tightening her coat around Sarah. "Daniel found proof that they laundered money through local government contracts. He was building a case. He told me he had everything on a USB drive. Names, transfers, evidence. Then he stopped coming home on time. I knew something was wrong." Ethan nodded once, silent. "They killed him 3 nights ago," she continued, her voice cracking despite her effort to control it. "He called me from a payphone, told me to take Sarah and go to the old warehouse, said he'd meet us there with the files, but instead—" She trailed off, staring blankly ahead. "Instead, I found his badge on the ground, and his blood." Ethan's jaw clenched. He didn't ask what she'd done next. He could see it in her face. The panic, the escape, the blind run through the snow until Rex had found her. The vehicle jolted as it turned down a narrow service road, the snow crunching deep beneath the tires. Up ahead stood a small structure of reinforced concrete, half buried under white. A faded U.S. flag still clung to its pole. "This is it," Ethan said. "Old training outpost off the grid." Inside, the air smelled faintly of dust and gun oil. The walls were lined with shelves of gear, rations, first aid kits, old radio equipment. Ethan turned on a single lantern that threw soft amber light across the room. He gestured toward a cot in the corner. "You can rest there. Sarah can use the blanket." Emily laid her daughter down gently, brushing a stray curl from her cheek. In the flickering light, the fatigue on her face became clearer. The pale hollows beneath her eyes, the raw redness of windburn along her jawline. She was younger than Ethan had thought, maybe early 30s, with a posture that suggested she'd learned to brace herself against bad news long before tonight. Rex circled once before lying down near the door, ears twitching, eyes half closed but never unfocused. Ethan poured water into a metal cup and handed it to her. "Drink. You're dehydrated." She took it with trembling fingers. "You're not going to turn us in?" "No," he said simply, "but you're not safe here long." She looked up, meeting his eyes. "You're military. Why risk this?" Ethan stared at the map on the wall. Routes he'd drawn months ago out of boredom, now suddenly relevant. "Because your husband died doing something right. I'm not going to let that be wasted." Emily said nothing, but her expression softened, a quiet recognition that came from shared pain. Hours passed. The storm outside subsided into a gentle fall of snow. Ethan busied himself checking equipment, cleaning his rifle, and adjusting the generator. But even as he moved, he couldn't ignore the gnawing thought forming in the back of his mind. The Iron Vultures weren't just thugs. The fact that they'd found her so fast meant they had reach, possibly in law enforcement, maybe even military intelligence. At dawn, pale blue light seeped through the cracks of the boarded windows. Sarah stirred, rubbing her eyes. She looked smaller in the gray light, her expression wary but curious. "Hi," Ethan said quietly. "You must be Sarah." The girl nodded. She was delicate, with the same auburn hair as her mother and dark, intelligent eyes that missed nothing. She held her rabbit close. "Rex saved us," she whispered. Ethan smiled faintly. "Yeah, he's good at that." She hesitated before reaching out a small hand toward the dog. Rex sniffed her fingers once, then licked them gently, tail wagging once before settling again. Sarah's lips curved into the smallest smile, the first Ethan had seen since last night. Emily watched from the cot, her voice soft. "She hasn't spoken to anyone since Daniel died. Maybe she just needed someone who listens," Ethan said. The peace didn't last. The faint hiss of the generator masked the sound at first, but Rex's sudden growl cut through the quiet like a blade. His body went rigid, ears pricked toward the outside. Ethan's instincts flared. He moved to the small window slit and peered out. Tracks, fresh ones, multiple, circling the edge of the compound. Then, a glint of movement in the tree line. A drone, small, black, hovering briefly before darting away. He cursed under his breath. "They found us!" Emily's face drained of color. "How?" "They must have traced your phone or Daniel's badge. Doesn't matter. We have to move." He grabbed his duffel, shoving gear inside. Ammunition, rations, maps. Emily tried to rouse Sarah, who blinked sleepily, confused by the sudden tension. "We can't go back to the city," Ethan muttered. "Too exposed. There's a contact of mine near Loveland Pass. Former intelligence. If anyone can decrypt that drive safely, it's him." "Who is he?" Emily asked as she zipped Sarah's jacket. Ethan paused a moment. "Name's Cole Jensen, ex-CIA. Gray hair, one eye, too many regrets. He owes me his life." Rex barked once. Sharp. Warning. Ethan turned back to the window. Down the hill, the first vehicle appeared. A black SUV, its tires wrapped in chains, headlights cutting through the frost. Then another. Emily clutched Sarah. They're already here. Ethan's voice was calm, deliberate, his military edge returning. Then we don't wait. He opened a hidden hatch at the rear of the outpost, revealing a snow-covered tunnel sloping downward. Back exit. Leads to the creek bed. Stay low. Don't stop until I say. She hesitated. What about you? I'll buy time. Emily grabbed his arm, eyes fierce despite the fear. Don't you dare die for us. Ethan gave a small, grim smile. I'm not planning to. He handed her a shortwave radio and placed a hand on Rex's neck. The dog's eyes flicked between them, understanding more than words could say. Outside, the engines drew closer. Shadows moved among the trees, armed silhouettes fanning out in a practiced formation. Ethan stepped into the snow, rifle raised, his breath clouding in the dawn light. The sky above was turning pink, indifferent to the chaos below. Behind him, Emily and Sarah vanished into the tunnel, Rex following after a single backward glance. Ethan whispered to himself, Let's see how many vultures the storm can bury. Then, as the first bullet shattered the morning stillness, the chapter ended in the echo of war. The storm had slowed, but the wind still howled through the pines like a wounded animal. Ethan crouched behind the half-collapsed barricade of sandbags outside the outpost, snow clinging to his shoulders and rifle. The iron vultures were closing in, 3 SUVs now, engines idling low, their beams cutting across the whiteness like spears of light. He could see silhouettes moving, dark coats, helmets, rifles with thermal scopes. Professionals, not street scum. They had military discipline, which meant they'd been bought from somewhere darker than the streets. Ethan exhaled slowly, counting. He could almost hear the seconds between each movement. His gloves creaked as he reloaded. Then he fired. 3 short bursts that cracked through the silence. One shape dropped, another ducked behind a vehicle. Muzzle flashes erupted in return, the air singing with rounds that tore through wooden panels and bark. He kept firing, then moved, rolling behind a snow mound. It wasn't about winning. It was about time. Below the outpost, in the narrow tunnel beneath the earth, Emily and Sarah stumbled through the half-frozen passage. The walls were damp, narrow, the air thick with the smell of rust and old earth. Emily held Sarah close, whispering, "Keep going, baby, keep going." The little girl's small boots slipped on the icy floor, but she pushed forward, guided by Rex. The dog moved ahead, his breath steaming in the cold, tail low but alert. He paused now and then, ears twitching, listening to the chaos above. When they reached the end of the tunnel, a heavy steel grate blocked their way. Emily struggled to lift it, her breath fogging. It wouldn't budge. She turned to Rex. "Can you?" The dog seemed to understand. He pressed his paws against the metal, bracing himself. Emily pushed again, teeth gritted. The grate screeched, then gave way with a sharp clang. They crawled out into the frozen creek bed, gasping as the dawn wind hit their faces. Emily looked up toward the ridge. The faint orange glow of muzzle flashes flickered between the trees. Her throat tightened. "He's still up there," she whispered. Sarah clutched her sleeve. "Mom, is he going to die?" Emily hesitated, her voice trembling. "Not if we can help it." They moved along the creek, trying to stay low. The snow was waist-deep in some spots, and each step was a battle. Emily's legs burned. She was no soldier. her frame slender, built for city streets, not wilderness. But motherhood had carved something fierce into her bones, a will stronger than fear. She pressed on, clutching the USB drive under her coat as if it were a second heartbeat. Back at the outpost, Ethan was running out of time and ammo. The iron vultures had fanned out, circling. One of them, a tall man with a buzz cut and a jagged scar down his cheek, stepped forward, barking orders. His name was Rafe Maddox, mid-40s, ex-Marine gone rogue. His face was weathered, the kind of hard that didn't come from age but from years of bad choices. He was the kind of man who smiled when others bled. His left eye had a small twitch, a souvenir from an IED blast in Fallujah that had ended his military career and birthed something crueler in its place. "Move in!" Rafe shouted, voice booming. "We're burning this place down!" Flames began to rise from the northern wall as they doused fuel over the wood and set it alight. The smoke curled upward, black against the pale dawn. Ethan could feel the heat even through the cold. He gritted his teeth, checked the last magazine. "All right, Maddox," he muttered. "You want a fire? Let's give you one." He sprinted toward the side bunker, grabbed a fragmentation charge from his emergency crate, and primed it. He hurled it toward the nearest SUV. The explosion ripped through the clearing, scattering snow, fire, and men alike. Two of the attackers went down screaming, one clutching his arm, the other rolling in the snow to extinguish the flames crawling up his coat. Ethan ducked behind a tree, heart pounding, but then silence. Too sudden, too perfect. His instinct screamed. He turned just as a shadow moved from the right flank. A blow struck his shoulder, a rifle butt, and he went down hard, rolling through the snow. The cold bit into his wound like acid. Maddox loomed over him, grinning through the smoke. "End of the line, soldier." Ethan kicked out, catching the man's knee. Maddox stumbled, but recovered fast, slamming a fist into Ethan's ribs. They grappled in the snow. Ethan's movement slower now, his arm slick with blood. He managed to flip Maddox over once, but the man rolled with it, punching him across the jaw. "You should have stayed out of this," Maddox snarled. "You think one broken seal can stop us? We own this state." Ethan spat blood, smiling grimly. "Then I guess it's time someone took it back." He grabbed a shard of metal from the snow and swung. The edge sliced across Maddox's cheek. Maddox roared, staggered back, then fired. The bullet caught Ethan in the shoulder, spinning him sideways. The world blurred, smoke, snow, fire, all folding into one. Down in the creek, the gunshot echoed like thunder. Emily froze. "That's him," she breathed. Sarah looked up at her, tears pooling. "Mom, we can't leave him." Emily's chest heaved. She looked back toward the burning ridge, then down at Sarah's frightened face. Her choice was already made. "Stay with Rex," she said, voice firm. "Don't move until I come back." "Mom, promise me." Sarah nodded reluctantly, clutching Rex's collar. Emily turned and ran, her boots slipping, lungs burning, heart hammering louder than the gunfire above. She reached the ridge line as the flames consumed half the outpost. Through the smoke, she saw him, Ethan on one knee, bleeding, his gun gone, Maddox standing over him with a knife. "Goodbye, hero," Maddox sneered. Emily didn't think. She grabbed a fallen pistol from the snow and fired. The shot tore through the air, hitting Maddox square in the side. He staggered, howling, and dropped his weapon. Ethan, barely conscious, seized the moment. He lunged, tackling Maddox off the ridge. They tumbled down the slope, vanishing into the smoke and snow below. Emily scrambled after them, coughing through the haze. "Ethan!" she cried. But there was no answer, only the crackle of fire and the hiss of melting snow. When she reached the bottom, she found him, lying motionless, his body half buried in drift. Blood painted the snow beneath him in muted crimson. Rex bounded down the slope moments later, Sarah close behind, her face streaked with tears. Emily knelt, pressing her hands to Ethan's wound. "Stay with me," she whispered, her breath trembling. "Please." Rex whined, circling, then pressed his head against Ethan's chest as if trying to lend warmth. Sarah knelt beside her mother, silent, her small hand resting over Ethan's. Somewhere in the distance, sirens began to wail. The faint sound of reinforcements, or maybe more danger. Emily looked up at the horizon, where the smoke met the rising sun. She knew one thing for certain: they couldn't stay. She turned to Sarah, her voice firm through the fear. "We're not letting him die here." The next moment, Rex barked sharply, looking toward the forest road. Through the thinning smoke, the outline of another man appeared, tall, gray-haired, one eye covered by a black patch. He held a rifle low, his expression unreadable. "Emily Carter?" he called. "Ethan sent me." She froze, realizing who it must be. Cole Jensen. And behind him, on the ridge, the sound of engines grew louder again. Snow still fell over the ridge where the fire had died. Smoke rose in thin gray threads that vanished into the pale dawn. The smell of charred metal and gunpowder clung to the air. Emily knelt beside Ethan, pressing a torn piece of her coat against his shoulder wound, while Sarah crouched nearby, with Rex's head resting protectively across her knees. When Cole Jensen approached from the tree line, the girl stared at him, half in awe, half in fear. Cole was in his early 50s, but carried himself like a man still fighting wars no one remembered. He was tall, with shoulders that hinted at years of covert work, but one eye was covered by a matte black patch. The other eye, a pale blue, sharp and restless, studied everything. His hair, once brown, was streaked with silver, and a short beard shadowed a face etched with fatigue and old regret. There was something about him that felt both dangerous and deeply tired. He wore a tactical jacket marked by age, its pockets heavy with tools and secrets. "You're late," Ethan muttered, his voice hoarse but steady. Cole knelt beside him, examining the wound. "You're lucky I showed at all. You left me a half-burned location and 3 dead men as a welcome mat." Ethan managed a faint smirk. "You're still good at following smoke." Old habits. Cole pulled out a compact med kit, injecting a coagulant near the wound. "You'll live, but you won't like it. We have to move before they send another team." Emily watched the exchange, holding Sarah close. "Are you sure we can trust him?" she asked quietly. Ethan turned his head toward her. "He's saved my life before. He's the reason I'm not buried overseas." Cole didn't look up, and I might end up regretting that choice. His tone was dry, but not unkind. He wrapped the bandage tight and motioned to Rex. "Good dog," he said softly. The shepherd's tail gave one slow wag before his attention shifted back toward the forest. They moved quickly, loading Ethan into Cole's weathered black SUV, a vehicle that looked like it had seen more war than peace. Snow dusted the windshield, and the tires cut deep tracks as they descended the mountain roads. Sarah sat in the back seat between her mother and Rex, clutching the dog's thick fur like it was the only solid thing left in the world. Cole drove in silence for miles, his focus razor sharp. Every few minutes, he checked the mirrors, eyes scanning the horizon. Emily studied him quietly, the way his jaw tightened whenever he thought, the scar running from his left ear down to his neck. He was a man who didn't speak unless it mattered. "How do you know Ethan?" she asked finally. Cole's lips tightened into something that might have been a smile, but didn't quite make it. "Long time ago, Afghanistan. Different flags, same blood. He saved my squad after a bad call I made. 3 of my men didn't make it. That's what I live with." The confession hung in the air like frost. Sarah looked up at him with innocent curiosity, then reached out a small hand and offered a piece of the chocolate bar Emily had given her. "For your men," she said softly. Cole blinked, the corners of his eyes softening for the first time. He took it gently. "Thanks, kid." They reached a narrow road leading into Loveland Pass, the snow-packed cliffs towering over both sides like frozen walls. Cole slowed, eyes narrowing at the horizon. "There's a service tunnel ahead, abandoned since the avalanche last year. We'll use it to rest and plan our next move." When they entered the tunnel, the world outside seemed to vanish. The concrete walls swallowed the sound of wind. Inside, the air was cold, but still. Cole parked near the center, killed the engine, and lit a portable lamp that filled the tunnel with amber light. Ethan sat upright in the back, pale but lucid. Emily tended to him, cleaning his wound again while Sarah fed Rex bits of dried meat from a ration pack. Cole set up a small satellite receiver on the hood of the SUV. Its screen flickered with static. "Once this syncs, I'll access encrypted channels and see if the Bureau's already on alert," he said. Emily frowned. "You mean the FBI?" "Yeah," Cole replied, "but don't expect miracles. Iron Vultures have money, tech, and influence. If they've infiltrated any law enforcement, we'll know soon enough." Ethan shifted slightly, grimacing from pain. "What's your plan?" Cole tapped the device. "We deliver that drive to someone who can make it public before they silence us. But first, I need to decrypt it safely." He turned to Emily. "You have it?" Emily pulled the small flash drive from her coat pocket. It was silver, plain, unmarked except for a single engraved letter. D. Her voice faltered as she said, "Daniel hid it the night before he died. He said it was everything." Cole took it carefully, studying it like it was made of glass. "Then let's see if your husband died for something that can still matter." He connected the drive to a portable reader. The screen flashed lines of encrypted code. Cole's fingers flew over the keyboard. For a few minutes, the only sound was the faint hum of the generator and the tap of keys. Then the screen froze, and words appeared. "Athenia Systems. Internal Transfer Records Project. Black Star. Confidential." Cole's expression hardened. "Son of a... This isn't just criminal finance. They were funding weapons testing, private contractors, mercenaries, even black-budget government ties." Ethan leaned forward. "Names?" Cole nodded grimly. "Dozens. Politicians, CEOs, and your husband's report. It's here." Emily's breath caught. "He finished it." Cole continued scrolling, then stopped suddenly. "Wait, there's more. A tracker. They embedded a beacon in the drive. Every time it connects to a network, it pings their servers." Ethan swore under his breath. "So they know exactly where we are." As if on cue, the faint rumble of engines echoed from outside the tunnel. Cole's head snapped up. "They're fast." Emily clutched Sarah close. Rex growled, his fur bristling. Cole yanked the drive free, shoved it into a lead-lined pouch. "We need to move now." Ethan struggled to his feet. No time to outrun them in these roads. Cole's gaze flicked to the tunnel's far end, where the concrete cracked into a narrow maintenance shaft leading out to the cliffs. "There's another way." He turned to Emily, his voice steady but urgent. "You take Sarah and the drive. Follow the shaft. It leads to the ridge. There's an old ranger station a mile east. Get there and wait for us." Emily shook her head. "You can't fight them alone." Cole's good eye met hers, calm but resolute. "I'm not alone, I've got him," he said, nodding toward Ethan, who loaded his last magazine with a grim smile. Rex moved beside them, tail stiff, ready. The echo of approaching tires grew louder, headlights cutting through the tunnel's darkness. Cole stepped forward, rifle raised. "Go," he said, "and don't look back." Emily hesitated only a moment longer before taking Sarah's hand and disappearing into the shaft. The cold air rushed after them. Ethan glanced at Cole. "You sure about this?" Cole smirked faintly. "I've been waiting a long time for a clean exit." The first SUV burst into view, lights blinding. Cole fired first, the tunnel erupting into chaos. Gunfire echoed off the walls, sparks flashing against the concrete. Ethan took cover behind the SUV door, returning fire. Outside, on the ridge, Emily could still hear the battle raging behind her. Sarah squeezed her hand. "Mom, will they make it?" Emily didn't answer. She looked back once, tears in her eyes, then forced herself forward, and just as they reached the edge of the cliffside trail, a violent explosion lit the tunnel entrance behind them, sending fire and snow spiraling into the sky. Snow had followed them all the way down from Loveland Pass, softening the world into a pale hush that didn't match the violence they'd left behind. Emily trudged through the mountain trail, half carrying, half guiding Sarah through the cold. The girl's cheeks were raw and red, her small hands clinging to Rex's thick fur. The German shepherd moved close to them, his breath fogging the air, muscles coiled in alert tension. The echo of the explosion behind them still thundered in Emily's chest, every beat a question she didn't dare voice. Were Ethan and Cole alive? By nightfall, they reached the outer edge of Denver, a city draped in gray and neon. Slush filled the gutters, and the hum of passing cars felt almost obscene after the silence of the mountains. Emily's reflection in the wet glass of a bus stop startled her. Her face was hollow, lips cracked, hair tangled from the snow. She looked like a ghost, wearing the memory of the woman she used to be. Sarah leaned against her leg, silent and wide-eyed, her stuffed rabbit tucked under her arm. "Mom," Sarah whispered, "do you think they'll find us here?" Emily crouched and brushed a strand of hair from her daughter's face. "Not tonight," she said softly, but her eyes betrayed doubt. Rex's low growl snapped her back to the present. A man was approaching from across the street, his figure hunched under a heavy coat. He moved with a limp, his head low. When he reached the lamplight, Emily saw the gray beard, the tired eyes, the faint scar under his left eye. "Emily Carter?" he asked quietly. His voice was gravel wrapped in fatigue. She froze, one hand instinctively going to the gun tucked into her coat. "Who are you?" "Name's Victor Hale," the man said, lifting both hands. "I worked with Daniel, undercover task force, before everything went sideways." Victor looked like a man who'd been in too many fights and won too few. Mid-40s, tall but stooped slightly, as if burdened by years of regret. His clothes were worn but clean, a faded brown jacket, gloves with frayed stitching. His eyes, a washed-out blue, carried the same exhaustion Emily had seen in Ethan's. men who'd seen too much and felt too little afterward. "I saw the explosion on the mountain," Victor continued. "The agency flagged movement from that sector, unidentified. I knew it had to be you." Emily hesitated, glancing at Sarah. "If you worked with Daniel, prove it." Victor reached slowly into his pocket and pulled out a silver badge, scuffed but real. "He gave this to me after our last op," he said. "Said if anything happened, I'd know what to do." Emily's breath caught. She recognized the dent near the bottom corner, Daniel's thumbprint, the one he used to press against the metal when thinking. Victor's tone softened. "He trusted you more than anyone. Said you had courage he didn't deserve." Something in her chest cracked. For the first time in days, she felt tears sting her eyes. "Come on," Victor said, glancing around. "This isn't safe. I've got a place nearby." He led them through back streets and alleys, avoiding the cameras mounted on streetlights. Denver's underbelly smelled of exhaust and wet concrete. Finally, they reached a run-down apartment building. Inside, the light was dim, walls lined with old maps and photographs pinned by thumbtacks. Victor motioned for them to sit. "You'll be safe here for a bit. I've kept off the radar since the Bureau disbanded the task force." Emily sank into a chair, exhaustion washing over her. Rex lay beside Sarah, head on his paws, but his eyes never closed. Victor poured her a cup of instant coffee, then sat opposite her. "Daniel was closing in on something big before he died. You have it, don't you? The drive." Emily nodded, pulling the small pouch from her coat. Cole decrypted part of it before her voice broke. "Before the explosion." Victor's expression hardened. "You're telling me Jensen's dead?" "I don't know," she whispered. He rubbed a hand over his beard. "If what's on that drive is true, then Croft's empire stretches further than we thought. He's not just laundering money through tech and real estate. He's buying influence, defense contracts, government projects, you name it." Emily frowned. "You sound like you've been tracking him." "I have," Victor said grimly, "because Daniel wasn't the first to die chasing him." A heavy silence settled. Sarah leaned against her mother, eyes fluttering with sleep. Emily looked at Victor. "Then help me finish what Daniel started." Victor nodded slowly. "I intend to, but we can't go to the FBI. Half of them are compromised. There's one person we might trust, a journalist named Nina Brooks. Works at the Colorado Sentinel. She's exposed government corruption before, took down a senator last year. If we can get the files to her, she can make them public." He scribbled an address on a scrap of paper and handed it to Emily. "She's cautious. Doesn't meet strangers in daylight." Emily took it, memorizing the name. Outside, a siren wailed, distant but rising. Victor moved to the window, parting the blinds. "We may not have much time. Croft's men won't stop." Suddenly Rex barked, a sharp, warning sound. Emily turned just as the front door rattled violently. Someone kicked it once, then twice, and the frame cracked. Victor drew his gun, his movements quick despite his limp. "Back room! Go!" Emily grabbed Sarah's hand, clutching the drive. They darted through the narrow hallway as the door burst open behind them. Muzzle flashes strobed the darkness. Victor returned fire, shouting, "Go! I'll cover you!" Emily slammed the back door open into a service alley. Snow drifted down like ash, catching the orange glow of gunfire behind them. Rex ran ahead, barking furiously, leading them toward the next street. Sarah stumbled, but Emily scooped her up, pushing forward with everything left in her. They ducked behind a dumpster, panting. Across the alley, the sound of tires screeched. Two black SUVs slid into view, headlights cutting through the steam rising from sewer grates. Victor emerged moments later, bleeding from a wound in his shoulder, but still standing. He reached them, breathing hard. "We can't outrun them. We split up." Emily shook her head. "No, I'm not leaving you." Victor grabbed her arm, eyes fierce. "This isn't about me. You get that drive to Nina. I'll lead them off." Before she could protest, he raised his gun and fired at the nearest SUV, drawing their attention. The vehicle swerved, tires shrieking, and men spilled out with rifles. "Run!" Victor shouted. Emily turned and bolted down the alley, clutching Sarah tight, Rex sprinting beside them. Behind her, Victor's silhouette disappeared into the storm of bullets and smoke. She didn't stop until she reached the edge of the industrial district, where the skyline opened and the night swallowed them whole. Her lungs burned and tears froze on her cheeks. Sarah buried her face in her shoulder, sobbing quietly. When Emily finally looked back, the only thing visible was the faint orange glow rises behind the skyline. Another fire, another man gone. But as she turned forward, something moved in the shadows ahead. A figure stepped into the streetlight, limping slightly, his arm bandaged with a torn piece of cloth. His face was dirty, half covered in blood, but unmistakable. Ethan Ward. And behind him, somewhere far in the dark, came the faint growl of an approaching engine. The first light of dawn bled over the Denver skyline, turning the rooftops into sheets of dull gold. Snow still clung to the gutters, glowing faintly in the haze of early morning. The city was waking, but for Ethan Ward, every movement hurt like waking from a nightmare. His right arm was bound in torn fabric, his knuckles raw, face pale under a crust of dried blood. Yet his eyes, those gray, watchful eyes, still carried that steady, unbreakable calm. Across the narrow street, Emily stood frozen, holding Sarah close while Rex barked once, as if confirming the impossible. The man she thought she'd lost stepped toward her, each step heavy but certain. "You're alive," she whispered, half a sob, half a prayer. Ethan nodded slightly, stopping just short of them. "Cole didn't make it," he said quietly. His voice was hoarse, weighted with something deeper than exhaustion. "He stayed behind to make sure I got out, blew the tunnel with the last charge." Emily's throat tightened. She wanted to ask why, but she could see the answer in his face. Because that's what soldiers do when there's still something left to save. "We need to move," Ethan said. "They'll be coming. Where's Victor?" Her eyes dimmed. "He didn't make it either. He helped us escape. I think he knew it was the end." Ethan exhaled slow and hard. The silence between them carried the weight of too many ghosts. Then he looked down at Sarah, who peered up from behind her mother's coat. The little girl stepped forward and hugged him suddenly, small arms wrapping around his waist. "I knew you'd come back," she whispered. For the first time, Ethan's composure cracked. He crouched, wincing at the pain, and brushed her hair gently. "You're tougher than half the soldiers I've served with," he said, voice soft. Sarah smiled faintly, clutching her rabbit. Rex pressed close beside them, tail swaying. His muzzle was flecked with frost, eyes bright and loyal. To the untrained eye, he was just a dog. But to Ethan, he was proof that faith could take shape and breathe beside you. They sheltered in an abandoned subway entrance, a hollow under the street that reeked of rust and oil. Ethan spread a worn blanket over the floor while Emily heated a can of soup over a small burner Victor had left behind. The flickering flame threw their shadows across the tiled wall, 3 figures and a dog, bound by survival. "We still have the drive," Emily said, her voice low. "Victor mentioned a journalist, Nina Brooks." Ethan nodded. "Then that's our next stop." By noon, the snow had turned to rain, smearing the streets into mirrors of gray. Ethan and Emily walked close together, Sarah holding Rex's leash. The dog stayed near the curb, nose twitching, reading the invisible trails of the city. They reached the Colorado Sentinel, a tall brick building wedged between a bank and a pawn shop. Inside, the lobby smelled of old paper and coffee. The receptionist, a young man with anxious eyes, looked up as they entered. "I need to see Nina Brooks," Ethan said, flashing what was left of his old Navy ID. "It's about a story she's been chasing." The man blinked. "She's in conference. Can I—" "Tell her it's about Project Black Star," Ethan interrupted. That did it. 10 minutes later, Nina Brooks appeared, a woman in her mid-30s with sharp features softened by empathy. Her hair was a dark auburn, tied loosely at the nape of her neck, and her eyes were the kind that missed nothing. She wore a long gray coat over a simple blouse and slacks, and there was ink smudged on her fingertips, the mark of someone who still believed words could fight monsters. "Follow me," she said briskly, leading them upstairs. Her office was small but cluttered, walls covered with articles, maps, and red thread connections of corruption that stretched across the board like a web. She shut the blinds, locked the door, and turned to them. "You've got something for me." Emily pulled the USB from her coat. "My husband died for this." Nina took it carefully as if it were made of glass. "Then we'll make it count." Ethan crossed his arms, watching her boot up her computer. "Before you open that, you should know. It's been traced before. Once it's online, there's no going back." Nina looked up, eyes steady. "That's exactly the point." For an hour she worked, decrypting, copying, verifying. The room was filled with the soft hum of machines and the occasional sharp intake of breath as lines of evidence appeared. Names, bank routes, secret contracts, government signatures, all tying Julian Croft and his corporation to illegal arms development and assassinations disguised as accidents. "This," Nina whispered, scrolling through the data, "this could burn half the city." "Then burn it," Ethan said simply. She glanced at him, almost smiling. "You really are military." "Was," he corrected. "Now I'm just someone cleaning up what's left." When the upload finished, Nina leaned back. "I sent it to 3 outlets and 2 independent investigators. If they try to stop one, the others will already have it." She turned to Emily. "Your husband didn't die in vain." Emily's eyes filled with tears she didn't hide. "Thank you." Nina nodded softly. "No, thank you for finishing what so many were too afraid to start." Ethan moved to the window, scanning the streets below. His instincts never rested. Through the drizzle, he saw movement. 2 black sedans idling near the corner. His jaw tightened. "We're out of time." Nina stood, closing her laptop. "There's a service exit behind the loading dock. Go, I'll stay and delay them." "You'll be killed," Emily said. Nina's lips curved into a small, defiant smile. "I've been dying for the truth my whole career. Might as well do it right." Ethan wanted to argue, but he saw the same steel in her eyes that he'd seen in soldiers who'd already accepted the cost. "Good luck," he said. She nodded once. "Same to you, soldier." They slipped down the back stairs, emerging into an alley that smelled of rain and electricity. Rex led the way, paws splashing through puddles. Across the street, the sirens began to rise, blending with the thrum of helicopters circling overhead. Emily looked back one last time, seeing the glow of computer screens flare through the newsroom windows, proof that the truth was already escaping into the world. They reached the outskirts by dusk, finding shelter in an old cabin beyond the river. Inside, the air was warm, lit by the glow of a small fireplace. Sarah slept curled beside Rex, her small hand resting on his fur. The dog's chest rose and fell in rhythm, his tail twitching with dreams. Emily sat beside Ethan on the old couch, the silence between them thick but peaceful. "What happens now?" she asked quietly. Ethan stared into the flames. "Croft will run. The system will scramble to clean itself. But for tonight—" He exhaled, shoulders relaxing for the first time in weeks. "We breathe." Emily's eyes softened. "And after that?" He looked at her, the firelight reflecting in his eyes. "After that, we rebuild. Whatever's left." Outside, the storm had finally stopped. Snow melted from the branches, dripping like slow tears into the soil. The night was calm, unarmed, honest. Ethan leaned back, exhaustion overtaking him as Emily rested her head on his shoulder. Rex shifted slightly, watching the door as if still guarding something sacred far away. On the flickering screens of 1,000 homes, headlines began to appear. Project Black Star exposed. Billionaire Julian Croft under federal investigation. But in the quiet of that small cabin, it wasn't victory they felt. It was peace. Fragile, human, and hard-earned. And when morning came, for the first time in months, the world was still. When the world goes silent after the storm, that's when miracles often whisper the loudest. They don't always come as thunder or fire from the heavens. Sometimes they wear the face of a soldier who refuses to give up, a mother who still believes, or a child who dares to hope. And sometimes God's hand isn't seen in the rescue, but in the courage that keeps us moving when we can't see the way ahead. Tonight, as Ethan, Emily, Sarah, and Rex sit beneath the soft glow of the fire, their story reminds us that faith doesn't vanish in darkness, it is forged there. The same God who carried them through the snow still walks among us, in every act of kindness, in every prayer whispered for someone else, in every moment we choose to stand for what's right, even when it costs us everything. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs hope tonight. Comment below where you're watching from, so we can see how far these stories of faith and second chances travel. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more true miracles, because somewhere out there, another heart is waiting to believe again. May God bless you and keep you, and may His light guide you through every storm, every trial, and every long night until the dawn.